education. The picture is a visual representation of what lecturers see in their classrooms and what the group of students we have in our institutions. It's no longer like before where students with disabilities had their special school where they went to. Now when they come to higher education institutions, it's a blended approach. Hence we understand why lecturers feel overwhelmed when they have such a classroom. And then, I don't know, colleagues from the DU will understand when the lecturers would say, it's your student, serve your student. But then now we are there to bridge the gap and say, it's not the DU student, it's not student support services student, but it's the student of the institution. This picture also represents disabilities that are visible and some that are not visible. Hence, lecturers has to take an approach that can include all of them and not that just the ones that they can see. Important principles of inclusive education is valuing students' diverse capacities. Therefore, higher institutions have the responsibility to, by changing structures, systems, policies, practices, and structures, adapting educational systems to meet the needs of individuals, meaning student support services is the scaffolding that upholds the academic and co-curriculum agenda of higher institutions. We have a very important role to play, colleagues. Where am I? Okay. We are the bridge between academics and the students. Academics in the sense that they come to us and say, I have to teach now, I have to get through my curriculum, I have to do all of that, plus I must cater for a student with a disability. How is that even possible? On the other side, we have students with a disability that say, no, I don't want to go to my lecture because ma'am so-and-so looks very strict. Then we are there to say, no, this is what you can do, and this is what academia, this is what you can do to assist students. Like my colleague previously said, just lend a learning ear and that will assist. What we do is we say, use the universal design for learning. This is what we found works for us. An approach with equitable opportunity at its core, the focus on learning. Phasing out unnecessary specific accommodation. You see the one on the slide, which means that if there's one thing that one can change, that is already enough. Because if a student comes to a lecturer in a class and says, ma'am, sir, your PowerPoint is not accessible for me. Ma'am, the videos that you show in class is not accessible for me. Then you can say, okay, work on that for your curriculum. Instead of having a video with only music and you have a visually impaired student, rather have words as well. If you have got a student who is deaf, don't just have a person speaking, put on your captioning. See small changes, one change, and then you continue with that and go ahead. Next time when you get another student, you change another one thing, and that's how you make your space inclusive. And the benefits then of universal design and learning is change the institutional culture. We're moving away from traditional focus of the individual with a problem, and we're creating the environment, an equal environment for students. There's no way a student with a disability can change and tomorrow the disability will be gone. Look at the environment and how to include that student as best as we can to make this learning experience pleasurable, enjoyable, and not be a barrier for the student. Gaining epistemological access. I'm so happy I got that word right. I practiced the whole time. Teaching and learning process is the most critical area. Academic staff have the critical role in creating equitable opportunity, not denying that certain provisions, additional support will be required. We are not saying academia, now this is your student, change your classroom, change what you do. Yes, we as student support services, we are there, we will be able to assist you, guide you, help you with accommodations that will help the students succeed in the classroom. The proactive approach is rather better than a reactive approach. It's so painful when you hear at the end of the students' studies, ma'am, if I only knew that this kind of support was available. That is one of the, I don't know if I'll ever get over that sentence. Because students, yes, you are alone. Imagine one student with a disability in this whole room. You don't want to bring attention to you, already different. Now you must, please, please, please me. But if you were the inclusive or UDL approach in teaching, that student could have been assisted. But not taking the onus away from the student to also report, but we'll get to that. I said the proactive approach, moving away from one-size-fits-all approach. Flexibility is vital. UDL principles and guidelines are a helpful start. Okay. There are 3 principles that we advise lecturers when we sit with them. And we tell them, the first principle is provide multiple means of representation. Don't just be stuck on the test and answer way. If the student can send a voice note on WhatsApp, if the student can be recorded doing an assessment, that's also good. If the student can come to your office and do an oral, that can also be. I'm not saying minimize or dilute the value of the assessment, but we're just saying be flexible. The second principle is provide multiple means of action and expression. It links back to the previous one. Be flexible. Don't just have one approach to say, sit down, come to the venue, write on pen and paper. If it's a deaf student, obviously have the proper measures in place, have a video recorder, let the students sign the answers and then have it written down. What we also do is, with deaf students, we know the structure, the way they write. They would write the answers and then we have someone else translate it in a more but proper English, I think, is the correct word, for lack of a better one at the moment. And then you attach what the student wrote with the transcribed material so the lecturer can see that there's no additions that happened. The third principle will then be provide multiple means of engagement. Provide options, okay, I'm there, yes. Provide options for recurring interest, provide options for sustaining efforts and persistence, pardon me. Okay, now the 3 principles I've explained. Now I'm just gonna talk about the practical implementations that you can advise lecturers when they come to you feeling overwhelmed about having a student with a disability in their class. Like I said, the +1 approach. Lecturers not required to become experts on disability. You can't expect an engineer, an accountant, to also be an expert on disability. No, we work together to assist the student. We also have a disclosure form that we ask students to submit where they say, I'm a student with this disability, I will need 1 through 2 and 3 assistance from you. Like I mentioned before, provide alternatives for courses, make textbooks available in different formats. You will have your Braille study material, make it available in time. Speak to them, explain to them the consequences of submitting something late to the department, to the DU. That will have implications because it takes days to convert from your one format to the other one. Provide closed captionings when you show a video. Don't just show a video with the person speaking. Be creative. Use audio descriptions when showing images when writing on the board, meaning, for example, the lecturer teaches mathematics and there's a visually impaired student in the class. And the lecturer would say, you move this and you move it there, and you move the top part and you move it to the bottom part. That doesn't make sense. Please be more descriptive. Rather say you take the X, which is on top, you move it down, and you multiply it with a 5. The other side, you have the 3, and you multiply it with the other 2, and then you will get that answer. Be descriptive when you explain. That is also one of the +1 changes that academics can make in the classroom. Provide multiple alternatives for assessing crucial information, and then course-specific information that might need to be addressed with support services that they can discuss with support services to say, this assessment, I have got graphs in my course. What else, or how can we change it to remove the graphs and add maybe words instead of having visual pictures? Another practical implication is the use of assistive technology to support or support staff in class. Invite students to switch on assistive technology, provide cooperative learning strategies. I know some academics are reluctant to have students bring in recorders to class, but then you just explain the purpose of the recorder is for the student to later, or the audio to be converted into transcriptions. Practical implications as well, the other one will then be assessments aim to provide a supportive and positive mechanism to improving learning. Students should be able to demonstrate the achievement of the required learning outcome, provide different methods of assessment, of examination, like I've mentioned before, an option to demonstrate what they know through different options. Don't just give a written format, come and speak, because now we're getting queries to say, I'm a student who stutters. What will happen in the class if I have to speak? You say, okay, speak to your lecturer and say, make your needs known to academia. Lecturers can't assume they're also humans, they're overwhelmed, they stand in the classroom, they also have nerves, they have all of that, but speak to them. The other important thing to also make staff aware, academia aware, is to not ask students in class to say something or not to introduce themselves. You don't know who cannot even hear. You don't know who has a voice impairment. Those small nitty-gritty changes that can make a more enjoyable class experience. Sure, okay, the slides and this thing, I think we are not understanding each other, but okay. With the scaffolding, by providing clear steps, reasonable accommodation might still be necessary, meaning students, depending on the disability, will receive different extra time and different accommodations. Students who are blind receive a certain amount of time, hearing impairment with a learning impairment as well. Students do apply for that. Flexibility without compromising, demonstration of essential learning outcome. Like I said, UDL does not mean that you dilute the work. It just means that you are more accommodative to the students. Considerations for the classroom. The seating of students. We usually recommend that students with disabilities sit in front. It's easier for someone who can follow their lips. It's easier for different reasons to sit in front. Identification by name. What that means is, let's say you have a student with a visual impairment who's totally blind, and someone raises their hand up in the classroom. You can't just say, yes, you with a red jacket, yes, no. Please stand up, state your name, and then answer. Those small changes that you can recommend or speak to colleagues about. Service animals, to make people aware that when a visually impaired student comes to class, there's a dog. I know some students are really, really scared of dogs. They'll be like, yo, ncha. But then, there's a dog, as a service dog, and don't pet him. You know, those small things that you can tell lecturers in advance to make the class aware. Verbalize while writing on the board is the same example I mentioned with the mathematics, to say you move the top, the B, you multiply with the X, and so forth. Verbalize movements in the class. You'll say, okay, I'm quickly going out, not just step out, because you have to include even the student who can't see that what's happening in the classroom. And like also with the directions, you take the right and you move it to the left. You're more descriptive in your explanations. Ask students for suggestions. I like the one example, the one colleague made, to say, we don't know everything. Yes, I'm an expert, I've studied in 1, 2, and 3, but the best people to ask is the student. It's like you're breathing in your ideas and you go, breathe out to the student, ask, is this really working for you? No, okay, go back. Breathe in, get ideas, and then come back. You can't just, my ideas, and then I run with it. Nothing without us, nothing for us without us. Okay. The mindfulness is just also to be mindful when presenting lessons or creating lesson plans, to say, I have a diverse class. I have people with different needs. Not all of them can be seen. But what can I best do to assist the student? The same with us as students supports, as practitioners. When students come to our classes, I have a student who he can't hear, but he can't sign. So instead of me writing down our conversation, I'll just open my laptop and open Teams so that when he speaks and then I respond, he can just read. Those creative ways, and I think we should always be on the ball as to what is happening in our sector to assist students. This is what we recommend that lecturers add in their learning material, either on their e-learning platforms or in the study guide, just to make the students feel welcome, to say, dear student, I respect your privacy. I'm also invested in your successfully passing, then you put in the module this year. I would appreciate if you could communicate your specific learning needs or challenges to me. In this way, I can make the lesson and content more accessible to you. Please feel free to contact me, and then you insert the email. I think this is more private instead of rushing to the lecturer after class and having to say, I can't hear, I can't. And the other slide that can be inserted is that student support services are available for students with disabilities. If you think you can benefit from such services, contact the SET office. As I said before, there's nothing as painful as a student coming in their final year and say, I didn't know that such services exist. Although we advocate and say we are there, but students are students. I'm going to use the opportunity to also say that we have a short learning program that explains the different accommodation needs for us as support service practitioners and also for academia that want to register for it. It really empowers you. It makes you feel confident and competent when assisting students with disabilities. Thank you.